Hello, chess enthusiasts! Welcome back to the Chess Ventura channel. In today's video, we'll be diving into a fascinating game played by one of the greatest chess players of all time, Garry Kasparov. This match features Kasparov against Grandmaster Semon Palatnik, played in 1978. In this game, we'll witness Kasparov's brilliant attacking tactics, initiated with a series of stunning piece sacrifices. Let's jump straight into the game. Here, Kasparov had the white pieces and started with pawn to e4. Black responded with knight to f6, employing Alekhine's defense. White pushed the pawn to e5, driving the black knight leap to d5. Kasparov then advanced the pawn to d4, while black countered with pawn to d6, challenging white to exchange pawns. However, Kasparov declined the exchange and developed his knight to f3. Black responded with pawn to g6, preparing to fianchetto the bishop on g7. White then brought out the bishop to c4, putting pressure on black's knight. Black moved the knight to b6, attacking the white light-squared bishop. Kasparov retreated the bishop to b3, and black continued with pawn to a5, threatening to trap the bishop with a4. Naturally, Kasparov thwarted this plan by advancing his own pawn to a4, halting black's pawn push. Following this, black proceeded with the fianchetto plan, positioning the bishop on g7. At this point, Kasparov played aggressively, leaping his knight to g5, targeting black's weak pawn on f7. However, Palatnik easily neutralized the threat by advancing his pawn to e6, blocking the bishop's attack on f7. Now, black posed a threat to the white pawn on e5. To reinforce his central pawn, Kasparov pushed his pawn to f4. Black began dismantling the center with pawn takes e5, and Kasparov responded by capturing the pawn on e5 with f4. Black then advanced the pawn to c5, attacking white's central pawn on d4. If white captured on c5, black's queen would capture white's queen, denying Kasparov the opportunity to castle. Hence, Kasparov rejected the exchange and opted for kingside castling. This castling maneuver placed pressure on black's f7 pawn, as it was now targeted by white's knight and rook on f1. Black resolved this pressure by castling short. Now black threatened to capture the d4 pawn on the next move. Kasparov reinforced the central pawn by advancing it to c3. Palatnik continued by developing his knight to c6, adding more pressure on the d4 pawn. However, Kasparov ignored this threat and moved his knight to e4. The idea was that if black captured the d4 pawn, white could respond with bishop to g5, pinning black's queen. Once the queen moved, for instance to c7, white could recapture the d4 pawn. Although material remained balanced, white's position was clearly superior. The coordination among white's pieces exerted significant pressure on black's kingside defenses. In the actual game, after white's knight moved to e4, Palatnik played the best defensive move for black, knight to d7. Kasparov then developed his bishop to e3 to fortify the central pawn on d4. After black repositioned his knight to e7, Kasparov shifted his bishop to g5, pinning black's knight to the queen. Black captured on d4 with the pawn, and Kasparov recaptured with his pawn. Black then drove away the bishop on g5 by advancing the h6 pawn. Kasparov retreated his bishop to h4, but Palatnik continued to attack by pushing the pawn to g5, forcing white's bishop to retreat further to f2. Why didn't the bishop retreat to g3 instead? If white had played bishop to g3, black could have gained a tempo by moving the knight to f5. This would not only pressure the bishop and the d4 pawn, but also create the threat of a fork on e3. For this reason, the best move for white was to retreat the bishop to f2. Black then played knight to g6, continuing development. Kasparov followed with knight to c3, and black responded with queen to e7. Kasparov repositioned his bishop to c2, while black pushed the pawn to b6, both strengthening the pawn on a5 and preparing to develop the dark-squared bishop to b7 or a6. At this stage, Kasparov began setting up his bold plan by placing his bishop on e3. Black countered by moving the bishop to a6, targeting the white rook on f1. Kasparov lifted his rook to f2 to evade the threat. At this point, the best move for black would have been to push the pawn to f5. However, for reasons unknown, Palatnik chose instead to retreat his knight to h8. Kasparov, recognizing black's mistake, confidently sacrificed his dark-squared bishop by capturing the pawn on g5, attacking black's queen. After black's pawn recaptured the bishop, white's queen moved to h5, creating a dual threat alongside the knight. A potential checkmate with knight captures on g5, followed by queen to h7. In response to this threat, black pushed the pawn to f5, attacking white's knight on e4. Kasparov, undeterred, captured the pawn on g5 with the knight, maintaining the looming checkmate threat. Black countered by moving the rook to f7, allowing the king a possible escape to f8. At this point, many players might consider exchanging their knight for black's rook. However, Kasparov opted for another brilliant sacrifice. The light-squared bishop captured the pawn on f5. Now, black faced two options: recapture with the pawn or the rook. In the original game, black captured white's light-squared bishop with the rook. But let's explore what would happen if black had captured the bishop with the pawn. If black's pawn takes the bishop, white has a very strong move with knight to d5, attacking the queen. The queen now has only two safe squares to retreat to: e8 or d8. If it moves to f8, it's an instant checkmate with the queen to h7. If black's queen moves to d8, white's queen checks on h7. This forces the king to f8, followed by knight to e6 with a double check. It's clear that black's queen would be lost on the next move. Alternatively, if the queen moves to e8, white's knight jumps to c7, forking the queen and rook. After the queen moves, let's say to c8, white's queen can deliver a check on h7. This forces black's king to f8, and then white's knight captures the rook on f7. As we can see, white's pieces are incredibly active, exerting pressure on black's defenses. This leaves black struggling to fend off white's relentless attack in the following moves. For this reason, the best move for black is to capture the bishop with the rook, which is the move Semon Palatnik chose. Kasparov then continued his attack by capturing the rook with his own rook. The threat is clear: checkmate with the queen to h7. Black responded by recapturing the rook with the pawn. Kasparov then played knight to d5. Black moved the queen to e8, attempting to exchange queens, but white declined with queen to h7, delivering a check. This forced the king to f8, followed by the queen capturing a pawn with another check. The king retreated to g8, only for the queen to return to h7, delivering yet another check. After the king moved back to f8, Kasparov played rook to a3, setting up the next move. At this point, black's king is trapped on f8 with nowhere to escape. There isn't much black can do in this position. Black tried to create counterplay with rook to c8, threatening a check on c1. However, white was faster with rook to f3, delivering a check. After black blocked the check with the knight, Kasparov didn't rush to capture it. Instead, he advanced his pawn to h3, creating an escape route for his king in case of a back rank threat. Black then moved the queen to g6, offering a queen exchange. This was a logical move given black's dire situation, but Kasparov, in his dominant position, refused the exchange and captured the knight with the rook, delivering a discovered check. When black's bishop recaptured the rook, white's knight jumped to e6, delivering another check. At this point, it became evident how free white's knights were to dance around the board, continuously attacking black's king. Meanwhile, black's pieces were passive and unable to contribute to the defense. This was the payoff for Kasparov's earlier sacrifices. Here, black's king had no choice but to move to e8. White's knight then captured the bishop, delivering yet another check. This move led Semon Palatnik to resign on move 37. If the game had continued, black would have been forced to capture the knight with the queen. White's pawn would then recapture the queen, threatening checkmate with the queen on e7. Black would have to prevent the checkmate by moving the knight to f7. White's queen would then check on g8, forcing the black king to d7, after which the queen would capture the knight with another check. After the black king moves, let's say to c6, white can place the queen on e7, which could then be followed by promoting the pawn to a queen. In this situation, black would have no way to stop the pawn's advance. Alright, that's all for this video. I hope this analysis broadens your understanding of chess strategy. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next chess video.